So I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. Now, The Vampire Lestat is the second book in the Vampire Chronicles. This, of course, is a sequel to Interview with the Vampire. Now, this was published in 1985, and basically the whole book is told from the point of view of Lestat, who was the main antagonist of Interview with the Vampire. Now, Interview with the Vampire was all told from the point of view of Louis, and in that book Lestat was very much painted as the villain, but in this book it's all told from Lestat's point of view. So in this book you realize that Lestat is not as evil as Louis made him out to be in Interview with the Vampire, and and you start to understand some of Lestat's motives a little better in this book. Basically, the book begins in the 1980s, and it begins where Lestat basically joins a rock band called Satan's Night Out, and he tells them that he's a vampire, and basically they actually start making it big. They release an album, and then they start releasing music videos, and Lestat actually writes an autobiography about himself, claiming that he's a vampire, and of course he is a vampire, and he gets it published, and basically the whole reason he's doing this is he wants to reveal to the world that he's a vampire. So this rock band he joins, they get big, and he tells the public that he's a vampire, and the general public take this as a gimmick. They just think that it's a gimmick for the band, but of course Lestat is actually serious about this, because Lestat actually is a vampire, and Lestat pretty much knows that mortals aren't actually going to believe that he's a vampire. They're just going to generally think it's a gimmick for the band, but the real reason Lestat is doing this is because basically it's a rule among vampires that they're not allowed to reveal themselves to the public. They're not allowed to reveal themselves to mortals, so Lestat knows by doing this is going to piss a lot of his own kind off, and that's what he wants to do. Lestat is the kind of character who, he just does things to see what would happen. He doesn't really care about the consequences, or he doesn't really think about the consequences. He just does them to see what would happen, and that's something I kind of liked about the character. But basically, only the first part of the book and the last part of the book actually take place in the 80s, where he's in this rock band. The whole book is actually a story within the story, and this story within the story is the autobiography that he wrote, and basically you find out how Lestat became a vampire and his life as a vampire, and basically, when Lestat was a human, his mother was very sick, and what happens is him and a friend of his went to Paris, and that's where Lestat got turned into a vampire. But I don't want to give away who it was who turned him into a vampire. But basically, after Lestat got turned into a vampire, he later turned his dying mother into a vampire as well, and he turned his friend Nikki into a vampire. And basically, a lot of the book, focuses on, Lestat's life as a vampire, and it's almost like Interview with the Vampire, where Louis talked about his life as a vampire. This time it's really Lestat telling his life story, but I don't want to give too much away about this, but you do find out some interesting things that kind of led up to the events in Interview with the Vampire. In Interview with the Vampire, the characters of Louis and Claudia go to this theater in Paris, which is run by vampires, called the Theater of the Vampires, and in this book you actually find out how that theater, came to be, and it's a really interesting book. I would say it's pretty much, I would probably say it's just as good as the first book. What was I gonna say? And, you really, understand the character of Lestat a lot better, because, like I said, in the first book, he was kind of the villain of the book, but in this book, he's, more of the protagonist, and that's something I kind of liked about it. But I like the character. I liked, how the character... Lestat is the kind of character who just does things to see what would happen, and he doesn't really think about the consequences. I kind of like that about the character, but yeah, that's The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice, and bye.